Perspicacity913 here. I'm sorry about my voice. I don't know if I'm getting sick or if it's just doing some early morning thing. I've been up for a little while, so that shouldn't be the case. But I just wanted to come and bring you a book talk. I am reviewing / discussing some topics in the Wednesday group by Sylvia True. So if you saw my Booktoberfest book haul, you saw that this was one of the books that I hauled there. I actually picked it up. It was the first book I picked up, and I read it all that night. I couldn't put it down. It was so good. So really quickly, I just want to get into, there's going to be like 3 parts of this video, but they'll all kind of blend together. First, I'll do a general review, and then I will do kind of a more in-depth talk with spoilers, and then I want to have a really brief discussion at the end about some of the emotions that this book brings up. And so first of all, I want to say this book was so well written. Sylvia True, this was her debut novel, and I honestly, when I heard that, it was super hard to believe because it was just so good. And not that debut novels can't be good, plenty of them have been, but she just did a really great job with it. It was really ironic that it was the first book that I chose to read and review for this channel, because the review is going to allow me to do what I wanted to do with my channel. Talk about books and talk about my thoughts on books, but also to talk about the emotions and the feelings that those books elicit. This is a perfect book for that. So I don't want this to be super long. I'm going to get right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about here is just that, again, book was really well written. I would recommend it to almost anyone. But if you're the type of person who needs all of the like loose strings in the plot to be tied up in a neat bow at the end, this probably isn't the book for you. If you really need to see anyone who's done something wrong in a book get their comeuppance, and be dealt justice, this might not be the book for you either. I actually personally think that everybody kind of gets justice or suffers the consequences of their actions in this book, but it's in a very conventional or non-conventional way. Non-conventional for books, that is. I will say this book was written extremely realistically, meaning the people, there was depth to the characters, there were real world situations, and all of the punishments came about in a real world way. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But again, I don't know how much more I can say about I didn't say the kind of premise. So the premise is there's a group of women who get together. They meet every Wednesday, hence the Wednesday group. And they are married to sex addicts. So their husbands are doing their own kind of therapy, but this group is for them to discuss how their husband's sex addiction has affected them and affected their families. So that's the premise of the book. It was just so real. It was so well done. I really appreciated it. And so I'm actually going to get into some spoilery discussion now. Maybe if you want to stick around for the discussion afterwards, kind of fast forward, I will try to insert a picture of an elephant. So when you see a picture of an elephant pop up, it'll be there for about 3 seconds, and you want to come back to the discussion, come back. So really quickly, moving forward into my kind of in-depth thoughts, I want to break this down into 3 main categories. First, I want to talk about Catherine. Catherine is the graduate student who is facilitating the group. She is in her last year studying psychology. She has clients, and so she has experience dealing with addiction, but not necessarily the spouses of those who are addicted. So she's really interested in this group. She's putting it together. She, makes all these decisions, brings these women together. But the one thing I want to talk about Catherine is that I thought it was a really great portrayal of a therapist, of a psychologist, of a facilitator of this kind of group who kind of has to keep a professional distance from her clients, but also really becomes invested in their stories and cares a lot about what it is that they are doing, what it is that they are going through. And it just shows a little bit of that internal struggle. At the end, when Gail is in the hospital and Bridget is kind of railing on her to be a real person and all these different things, you can see the struggle in her because she does care about these women, but she does have to maintain a professional distance. And I just thought that dynamic was really well done. I also thought Catherine was a quietly and beautifully strong character. I feel like a lot of the times in novels, when there's a strong female character, that character is strong physically, or they are, very outspoken and kind of not afraid to put themselves out there. That wasn't Catherine. Catherine just had really strong moral convictions and she stuck to them. Her boss put her in a very delicate situation with a potential breach in confidentiality with one of her clients, one of the women in the group. And she basically, at the end of that, because she had problems with her boss leading up to that as well, she basically was like, I think it's best if I find someone else to study under, because this was her supervisor. This was the person that she was under their tutelage. This was the dean of her school, or at least of the psychology department. And she said, I'll find someone else. The dean says, I could ruin your career. And Catherine is basically like, that's a chance I'm going to have to take. And I just thought that was so powerful. She's in her last few months of graduate school. She could have easily kind of let that slide. And once she was done, just not had anything to do with the dean anymore. But she knew that she was in the right. And so she decided that for the best for her and for the ladies in her group, she was going to have to find someone else to supervise her. And I respected the hell out of her for that, to be honest. Next, I want to talk about the husbands. So the husbands are the ones, clearly with the sex addiction. And let me say, I've never been addicted to anything myself, but I have had people in my life who have suffered from addiction to various things. And I know it's such a hard road. I know there are slip-ups. I know, it takes a lot of effort. And for something as, I guess, intangible as sex addiction, I can imagine that it'd be even more difficult. I do really appreciate the way that Sylvia True, not attacked, but discussed and demonstrated addiction in the book. So first I'm going to talk briefly about each of the husbands and just where I think they are. But Adam is the husband. He's Hannah's husband. He is dealing with sex addiction as a result of being molested as a child by his uncle. And you see Adam slip up. You see Adam slip up in a really big way. But Adam is the one husband that I believe the most wants to change and wants to make a difference and wants to, not have his wife struggle so much and he doesn't want to be addicted. He wants to, be able to live his life free of this kind of affliction. And it takes a while, but I believe Adam. I think when he is speaking, he's speaking the truth. Then you have Michael. Michael is addicted to the chase. So he's on all these dating websites, all this stuff, and he's told his wife, I never slept with any of them. It was just all about the chase for me. And throughout the novel, she finds out that that's not entirely true. He has slept with some of these women, and it kind of seemed like he fessed up because he knew that he was going to be caught. He said that he repressed the memories, which is a real thing. But he slept with quite a few of them. And so I don't think he repressed all of those memories. And I think he just kind of admitted to what he knew was going to be found out anyway. Also, his wife Bridget was pregnant. She got pregnant actually after sleeping with him and telling him it was going to be the last time they ever slept together. She was out for revenge and she got pregnant. And she was so emotionally tumultuous. He decided to leave and, stay with a friend for a while Bridget he and Bridget worked things out for themselves, alone, but for the same purpose of coming back together. And I think it's a bit controversial to say I'm going to leave my pregnant wife here by herself while we work on our issues separately, but I really do believe that Michael wanted he wanted Bridget to not have to be so stressed out every time he was in the room. They always fought. She couldn't help it, and I'll get into that in a bit. But you know, he wanted her to be stress free in their and during her pregnancy. Sorry. Then you have Greg, who I really hated Greg. He I do believe he was addicted. He was addicted to pornography. It just didn't seem like he was trying. Again, I've never been addicted to anything. I cannot say how difficult that is, but I've seen it. And I've seen what it looks like when someone's trying. And it just didn't seem like Greg is trying. He, you know, Lizzie came home in the middle of the day and found him watching porn. He got fired from his job for watching porn at work and didn't tell her he was fired. She had to find out. She's a teacher. She had to find out from her principal because parents had gotten wind of his situation and didn't want her teaching their kids, which I think is ridiculous. But either way, she had to find out that her husband lost his job in her boss's office. He, you know, left and was taking money and had spent more than half of their savings. And Greg was awful, and I just didn't think he was trying at all. He had stopped going to his therapist, lying about it. Like, just stop, Greg. And then Jonah, who it turns out wasn't a sex addict at all. He was just a cheater and a liar. And I just had no respect for him. He had no backbone. He had no, like, there's nothing about him, in my opinion, that was respectable. And so that also kind of touches on the topic of people who say they have an addiction and really they just want to do the thing they're doing. There's a difference. And you cannot trivialize addiction by calling yourself an addict when you're not. And he admitted to that at the end of the book. You know, I'm not a sex addict. I'm just in love with this other woman, basically. So I thought that was just a really interesting way to touch on that and to bring that kind of dynamic into the story. So next, I'm going to talk about the women of the group. I like identify with all of these women at one point in time. They were just real and true characters. So I love the realness of their emotions. I got annoyed with all of them at some point in time, as you do with people in general. I will say that I loved Lizzie. She was the one married to Greg, he's awful. And she wanted him to tell her that he loved her. She wanted him to tell her that, you know, he found her attractive, because also in the midst of his porn addiction, he wouldn't have sex with her. And she was, you know, battling with insecurity and doubt, and he would say, I love you, but kind of in like a off-putting, and I can't describe it, but it didn't really feel like, even reading the book, that he meant it. And so she was just super insecure. He dragged her through all this stuff at work. And eventually she was like, I'm out. She took a opportunity to go, I think, to Peru for the summer to build a school. And she was like, this is what I'm going to do. She, you know, prepaid her rent. He at least had somewhere to stay, but he would have had to find a job on his own, which is kind of what I mean about the natural kind of comeuppance that you get. She didn't, you know, yell and scream. She didn't push him off a cliff. You know what I mean? You know, she didn't get him arrested, even though he did hit her. What happened was she left him to fend for himself. And that's the kind of punishment that I'm talking about. It's a real world punishment. Sometimes people don't go to jail for the bad things they do, but they do have to face facts and like figure out what they're going to do with the rest of their life. And that's what I mean. Who else? Bridget. I really enjoyed Bridget. She was fantastic, and she really, she was bold and kind of brash, and it covered up a lot of her own insecurity and fear that her husband was doing more than he was letting on, which he was. But I just loved her. She got up in people's faces, and like I said, there were times where I was super annoyed. She was the one I was annoyed with the most, but I understood her, and she was a great character. Then you have Lizzie, Bridget, Gail. Oh, Gail. my heart broke for Gail. She was married to Jonah, and she really believed that, he wasn't seeing this woman anymore. She kept getting letters from this woman saying, your husband's in love with me. He's too scared to tell you all these different things. And she believed him when he said it wasn't true. And she kind of looked down on the women in the group, honestly, at the beginning. I think we were set up not to like Gail in the beginning, but her character development, she became a lot softer when she was with the women in the group. And I fell in love with her because of her need to like maintain a facade of perfection, and I knew it was going to come crashing down for her in a big way, and it really did. She ended up, she ended up basically going to the hospital because of a parent attempted suicide. I don't think she was trying to kill herself. She was having some issues, and she was taking medicine, and she mixed some medicine. She wasn't thinking clearly, but I don't think she was trying to kill herself. And so that was just also very interesting to see. And then you have Hannah. And Hannah, in my opinion, was the protagonist of this story. I feel like you hear the most about Hannah. She's the one married to Adam. Even though Catherine is the leader of the group, Hannah, I feel like, had the most chapters, because each person had, their own chapters in the group. In the book. She had the most chapters, and she also, like, when in other people's chapters, they would talk about or think about or talk to Hannah. And so Hannah's story was really the one of, like, her husband's truly addicted, but he's really trying to work on it. Her kids are picking up on the tension in the house and acting out in really big ways. And she's having to deal with all of it. She's, snapping at her kids, and not because she wants to, but because she just feels so emotionally unstable. She doesn't know, she can't make anything work, basically. She can't not snap at her kids because of the emotional turmoil in herself. And every time she sees her husband, it's like the same with all of them. I want him, but I hate him, kind of thing. And I will talk about that in a few. But Hannah's story was, I really did like Hannah, and I appreciated what she brought to the story. Then there was Flavia and Dimitri. Flavia was part of the group. She never had her own chapter. She left early, and so you don't really get to see much about her. I'm not talking much about her and her husband because they weren't non-factors. Flavia definitely played a role, but they left so early, and I kind of wish that she had stayed a bit, but I think that so Demetrius was charged with groping women on the subway, and eventually they were from Greece. They moved back to Greece, and I think Flavia's story was there to represent the thought of doing something for the sake of you, your husband, and your marriage. It was a difficult decision, but ultimately to like leave all of this temptation and to just go back to your roots and like be happy. And I choose to believe they are happy where they are. And so, elephant. The only thing, I did want to have a brief chat, and the only thing I want to talk about here, because this video is pretty long, is if you've ever been betrayed, if you have ever been lied to, if you've been manipulated, and all by someone that you really trust and you really care about, I really recommend reading this book. I've never been married, and so I will never presume to understand how it feels to have your marriage vows broken, but I have been cheated on in past relationships. I have been lied to. I've been manipulated, and it's an awful feeling. You have feelings of embarrassment. You feel guilty, like I should have known. I should have picked up on this. You're angry. You're hurt. Your self-esteem can be lowered. And reading this book just helped me to understand that I wasn't alone in those thoughts. And when you are trying to work through that situation with another person, especially with someone you're involved with romantically, it's even more difficult. I won't say even more difficult, but it's you want that person, you still love that person, you want to be around that person, but at the same time, you want them to constantly reassure you, but then you don't believe what they're saying because they've lied to you and they've broken your trust in such a major way. it's just it's a hard thing to deal with. And so I really just wanted everyone out there to say, or I wanted to say to everyone out there, if you feel this way, you are not alone. Um, it's a very hard thing to do, and if you're on that emotional roller coaster, the main point I want anyone to get out of this book and out of this discussion is that you are not wrong for feeling how you feel. Do not condemn yourself. Do not, don't make yourself the villain for your own feelings. We have a choice, I believe, when we, have feelings that we're uncomfortable with. We can unpack them and deal with them, or we don't and we let them fester. But we're never wrong. I personally believe you're never wrong for feeling how you feel. No matter how, I don't know, awful that emotion may be, no matter what thoughts spurn from that, the only thing that's wrong is when we don't deal with what we're feeling. But I just want everyone to understand, like, I've been there. It sucks. And I've felt so alone in the past, but that's part of why I made this channel, is just to help people not feel so alone. And so that's all I really wanted to say about it. Please, if you've read this book, what are your thoughts about it? Leave it in the comments below. If you have ever been in this kind of situation, married or not, romantic or platonic relationships deal with betrayal and lies and manipulation all the time. Let us know, how did you deal with that? Did you see a therapist? Did you kind of unpack your feelings? Are you still battling with those things? We can have a conversation about this, and that's really what I wanted to bring to my channel. So I've talked about the book. I've talked about my thoughts on the book. I've talked about the emotions that this book kind of brings forward, and that's what I'm here for. That's what I said I wanted to do in the beginning of the video, and that's what I've done. So I'm going to leave this here. Hopefully we can have a great discussion in the comments, and yeah, thanks for watching. You don't have to be here. You don't have to spend your time with me, and you did anyway, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Perspicacity913 out.